We are broadcasting live.
Yes, good morning, everyone. This is the council meeting of the town of Mono for Tuesday, November 23rd, 2021. This meeting is being conducted by means of electronic participation as permitted by section 238, subsection 3.1 of the Municipal Act 2001 as amended, and the Town of Mono Procedural Bylaw 2020-42. Council chambers are not open to the public at this time, but the public can view us online simultaneously or at a later date through our website. I see that we have a quorum and the meeting is called to order. Disclosure of pecuniary interest can occur at this point or at any point in the course of the meeting, followed up by writing to the clerk. We would like to begin by respectfully acknowledging that the town of Mono resides within the traditional territory and ancestral lands of the Tiatante, Atawataron, Haudenosaunee, and Anishinaabe peoples. We also acknowledge that the town of Mono resides within the treaty lands named under Treaty 18, the Nottawasaga Purchase of 1818. These traditional territories upon which we live and learn are steeped in rich Indigenous history and traditions. It is with this statement that we declare to honor and respect the past and present connection of Indigenous peoples with this land, its waterways, and resources. I have a motion to approve the agenda. Do I have a mover and a seconder on that? Councillor Davey moves, seconded by Councillor Martin. Are there any changes to the agenda or any desire to specifically address matters in Schedule A? Fred?
6 and 8.
Okay. Any other councillors have matters under Schedule A that they wish to pull forward? As this is a fairly new process, I'll return to that request at a later time if anything occurs. Any opposed to the motion that we approve the agenda of session 25, 2021 is circulated? That motion is carried. I have a motion to approve the previous minutes of session 24, 2021 as circulated. Mover, Councillor Magdalo, seconded by Deputy Mayor Nix. Any opposed to approval of the minutes as circulated? And that motion is carried. We have no proclamations today. Public question period. Fred, do we have any submitted questions or anybody online?
We've had no questions submitted online in advance, but I see that we do have a couple of callers on the line who may be here to ask questions.
Okay.
Okay, so
if you could speak up and join the meeting, we'd be happy to address your questions.
okay, so caller 1, did you have a question at this time for council? No, and I see we have Janice online. If you've got a question, if you could just give your name and pose your question for council, please.
So it looks like they're observers. So we'll move on to delegations. We have none. Unfinished business and deferred items. We have our list of council business. Does anyone have anything to address on that list? Okay, looks good. Next item is a report on the conversion of Maple Inn Nights into supportive housing, and Dave has submitted a report to us. Prior to discussion, I have a motion that we receive the planning memorandum from the Director of Planning dated November 23rd, and that the Director of Planning forward to the Town of Orangeville the concerns of Mono Council as expressed during this meeting. Do I have a mover for that? Councillor Martin, seconded by Deputy Mayor Nix. Discussion of Dave's report. Any questions of Dave? Dave, do you have anything to add to the report?
Thank you, Mayor Krillman. Not really. Managed to get to some bottom of a few things. It's all in the report. There will be one, I guess the most important thing to say at this point is, well, two things. Number one, I had inadvertently used the word shelter, and I meant to use it loosely back in the previous report. But of course, in assisted housing, that has a very defined definition. And so on page 1, you will see that I say it's not a shelter. They're housing units that are part of the conversion of this, what were a previous motel use. And I think some of the matters that also were cited in the CAO's letter of, I think it was October the 26th, they've also been referenced into this report. There will be a controlled layout of this building, as I understand it, from SHIP through a main entrance. And as far as I know, at this point too, there will also be on-site administrative attendance, if I can put it that way, from about 3 in the afternoon to 7 in the morning. So I guess anyone who would have to leave regular hours, and certainly through those hours, would have to go through the front desk, if you will. The only last thing I really want to say is that for all listening, we have reiterated the fact that there will be one more SHIP meeting, not a statutory public meeting that had been requested by Mono Council. In addition to the first one, but at least another SHIP of third of 3 meetings on December the 1st, 7 p.m. It's referenced in the attachment B in my report.
Thank you. And for the benefit of anyone listening, Dave, can you remind us of the meeting date of Orangeville Council where they will presumably receive a report and may vote on this matter?
Sure. It is cited in recommendation number 2. It's December 6th.
Okay.
So again, a SHIP meeting, third of 3 meetings to occur December 1st. I believe that's at 7 p.m. I just have to flip through to the attachment. I believe that's what it says. They were all at the same time. Yes, excuse me, 6 to 7 p.m. And then there will be an anticipation of a Orangeville Planning Department report with a recommendation to Orangeville Council at their upcoming December 6th session.
Okay. Any Deputy Mayor?
This is a related subject. Because the 236 First Street was being used as a shelter for some homeless men over the summer. It's not now. The last we heard, there was 2 people left and they were trying to place them someplace. But I did know, it was either last week or this week, I can't remember which, the Orangeville is continuing, they still have a committee on a homeless men's issue. And I think they're looking for a shelter. I tried to find the agenda to that meeting, but I couldn't, let alone the minutes. But so even putting aside 236 First Street and what it's going to be used for, it still leaves in abeyance the question of what happens to homeless men in Orangeville.
Councillor Davey?
Or even the broader, what happens to homeless men in Dufferin County, right? Because SHIP is supporting Dufferin County as a whole. And I think that at the meeting, their comment was that the 2 people that were left would be sorted by the end of November, and that they had helped to sort the other people who had been there in this summer in Dufferin County, not just in Orangeville. So, but yes, if there is going to be a shelter, some town needs to be in one of the towns, right?
Yep. Dave?
Just another point too, as I did mention, I think in a phone call Mayor Kerman, it might have been you, might have been another council member, I can't recall, that I had reached out, of course, to the project manager for SHIP. I had actually a nice little conversation with him, and they're a very well organized group. And I do know that one of their members is a very well-known and very well-respected expert in supportive social housing, Keith Ward. He had a long, good tenure at Region Appeal. I had the pleasure to work under him actually for a period of time, and to put in a phrase, he knows his stuff. And they have some other good people on SHIP as well.
Yeah. Ralph?
Yes, I'd just like to point out that we did request of Orangeville Council that they have another open house so that residents could present their concerns. We have had two, and we have one more SHIP meeting, and I'm very pleased that SHIP are being so open about this. I attended the second meeting, and there was an opportunity for the chat to discuss any issues. However, that is not Orangeville Council, and so if residents would like to Orangeville Council, then they have this opportunity on the 6th of December. So I'm not completely familiar with the processes that the council runs, but I'm sure that you can be a part of the public question period, and maybe you should contact them ahead of time to let them know that you have that interest. But so we did try to get an open house. They apparently Orangeville Council feel it's not necessary, but you still have an opportunity to speak on this at the council meeting.
Dave?
Just one more further point. Through that conversation with the project manager, I did ask and reiterate that he would recirculate their flyer, their bulletin. It had already been done so leading up to the first two meetings, November 1st and 3rd, I think they were. And he said, yes, they will do it again. They will recirculate that bulletin of that date, last remaining date, time and information in it to folks in the area. Including Mono.
For any Mono residents who might want to attend Orangeville Council on the 6th of December, be mindful of the fact that Orangeville Council tends to have its in-camera session at the outset of its meeting, not at the end of its meeting. And hence the start time is, shall we say, fluid. You know, that's all I can say on that, but do not be discouraged if you arrive virtually at the start time and find out that they are still dealing with matters in camera. Hang in there. Any other comments on this report? So we have a motion moved by Councillor Martin, seconded by Councillor Nix. Any opposed to the motion? And that motion is carried. Now we arrive at the budget, and we have a presentation scheduled for the Public Works Capital budget, and I will turn it over to Mike and or Les or both of you to take us through this.
Thank you, Worship, fellow council members. I submitted my report for your review. Your Worship, if you would like me to proceed through the individual items, I'm fine with that. And or if council wants to intervene and ask questions at any time, I'm really open for your suggestions, your Worship.
Okay. Any suggestions? How do we proceed, Fred?
Well, I mean, we've read the report, a very good report, Mike. I don't think you need to hold our hand and take us through it. I would prefer you just go to questions.
Are we agreeable with that? I certainly am. Okay, questions of Mike. Deputy Mayor? You're on mute.
I'm looking for my notes. I did have one question. It's one of the bridges. And it wasn't in your report as I understood it, Mike, but can we use DC charges? I'm just trying to find out which bridge that was.
I think that was Bridge 9. Either way, both bridges listed in the capital report that I've presented are both acceptable of some DC charges. The one on here, Ontario, will become a full 2-lane width structure, as it's only 1 lane right now, and that's Bridge 9, and Bridge 5. Bridge 5 will be widened a bit. It won't become a 2-lane structure. It's only a single-lane road into that. But we're looking at some potential DC funding for that as well.
Okay, the only other question I had, if I can continue, Your Worship, was on item number 13. I didn't understand it at first, but I've talked to Mike and I do now. That's $100,000. I thought this was going into a reserve for an electric vehicle pickup truck. But the $100,000, as I understand it, and Mike, you correct me if I'm wrong here, is going to be used both in the interim to buy a gasoline-powered pickup truck, and then the balance of the money will be set aside in a reserve for an EV truck, which we're looking at, what, $60,000 or $70,000 plus $20,000 for a charging station. So I'm not sure how much will be left over by the time we buy a gasoline-powered pickup truck. But that's my understanding of item number 13, right, Mike?
So I'm glad you brought this up, Deputy Mayor. My discussions with Ford, a little bit of research on GM and Dodge and Chevy. There's not a timeline as to when these trucks will be available. We've secured our spot in line for an F-150. That doesn't mean that we can't go out to quote to tender on other vehicles that will reach the level in the procurement bylaw that we will be required to go to tender. But there's no timeline as to when we can expect delivery. Ford expects in Shelburne area, expects to get maybe 20 of these. We're not number 1 on the list. We're way down the list, and this vehicle may not be available to 2023, which puts us in a small problem. Council is getting used to seeing multiple vehicles being replaced on a yearly basis. We have well over 15 fleet vehicles that require replacement, and none of them have more than a 15-year lifespan. So we're always replacing vehicles. It's something that should be expected. And you'll also note the delays in the snowplow tandem vehicles that I've identified. So nothing's coming quick. The time for replacement of this one pickup is now, and I'd like, basically what I'm saying is, if council would like me to sit and wait for an unknown vehicle replacement that will only be added to next year, because we have another pickup coming up next year, we may foresee a huge backlog. So the price of an electric vehicle is around $80,000. A commercial grade charging station. Now this has multiple charging ports. It's not just one plug. It'll provide us with similar information to the information we will receive from our new fuel management system. So it will provide us with kilometers, usage, charge times, and all the information that we need to, and move us forward in the future to be ready for multiple electric vehicles. So what I'm asking council is if they're okay with it, that we stay aside from the electric vehicle on this pickup replacement. And when I bring back when the full budget comes back to council in the new year, I would adjust this price in the capital section to around $58,000, which would be the resultant of a gasoline pickup purchase. And then sort of hopping on what Deputy Mayor Nix has said, between the treasurer and myself, we will adjust the equipment reserve contributions to enable us to purchase electric vehicles in the future. So that's sort of, if there was any questions on that. So this $100,000 financial impact will be adjusted to purchase a gasoline truck and to offset a correct amount in the reserve to adjust for electric vehicles in the future.
Mike, if I could, the charging station that we have installed at Town Hall, if push came to shove, that could be used to power the electric vehicle?
100% overnight for sure. I think it'd be fair, and during the day if there was nobody there. I don't think council wants to get into a position that we were hogging the public electrical station, but that's obvious. Overnight charging would not be a problem. It's a level 2 to the best of my knowledge, so it would be a 6 to 8 hour charge. We're still getting the full details on that charging station, but yes, the short answer, yes.
Okay, thank you. Melinda?
Thank you. So I guess, I mean, technology is changing all the time, but we've put in these public charging stations. The idea is that everything's going to be universal and that this charging station is going to work for the future and for any car that somebody from the public. So the one that you're thinking for, that is the 15 to 20 that you've put in your budget comments, or in your report rather, that's for something that works faster, works for more vehicles. Are you going to put off doing that until you get the vehicle? Or would it be added, something still going to do ahead of time so that we're ready when you get the vehicle?
So I know council a year ago or so dealt with the county with respect to getting on board with their granting program. I've sort of penciled our name in, Town of Mono's name in for a couple of these, but there's no commitment to purchase yet. And I think Councillor Davey, your first statement is why we're pausing right now. Technology is always changing. Putting in something today that we don't have yet. My intention is that these will probably be indoor chargers. They won't be accessible to the public. They'll be full for our future commercial fleet, and they will be charged overnight indoors, and that has a different price component to indoor outdoor mechanics of this. So I think I would like to say that we're on a hurry up and wait kind of. Let's just slow down a bit. I don't think we're there yet. The next year's pickup is a patrol vehicle, and the reason I think this is the most appropriate replacement, there's not heavy loads on this pickup unless we had an emergency or a light storm. This pickup drives around 8 hours a day in winter and at least a couple hours a day in the summertime. So it's a perfect, to me, it's a perfect test for something that is very early on in its stages. So, I think the 15 to 1,000, putting this into reserve, this money into reserve for future purchase of this type of equipment is, in my opinion, the best expenditure of money right now. I'm hoping that prices come down on chargers, and we may not need a charger till 2023, 2024 for commercial vehicles, and by that time we'll have a better idea whether these trucks can even carry a bag of sand around without draining the battery extensively. So we're really in the early stages, I think, of a work electric vehicle.
Sharon?
I thought that was a lovely budget, Mike. We've been talking about a south yard or sand and salt. Have we progressed anywhere on that? And land is pretty expensive right now. Do we own anything down here that would help with that situation?
So we do have some properties, but we're not really identifying them as an available location yet. My hopes so where we are today is in 2019, council approved the design and some work on the size and square footage of this building. Every year that goes on, our square footage requirements seem to go up. We're max next door now for our levels of service and our growth that has occurred. As council will recall, we've definitely added some fleet to our some machines to our fleet, and some service levels have changed, sidewalk machines, and we kicked the pollinator group out of the Baker shed all winter, and we utilize that for our snowplow equipment, and we are maxing, and our service levels, the service level requirements are definitely in the south end. So where we are today, we have a design, we have a general square footage that can be shifted depending on the lot design. And my hopes is to get a full report to council in the early of 2022 to talk about maybe setting up a committee to start to look for land, that we already have that may be utilized, and to start to down this process. And yes, land is expensive, and in this report that I would give to council, I would give you a new 2022 estimate of what the full financial impact would be, and the amount that was recoverable by development charges, and Les could speak to that a little more, but this is all growth related, and I would like to think the bulk of it will be covered by development charges.
Mike, Ralph?
I had something different to talk about. If you wanted to continue talking about the salt and sand place, please go ahead.
Mike, the definition of the south end of the town is presumably anything south of the Fifth Side Road?
And Cardinal Woods, there's a little bit of Cardinal Woods north of the 5 Side Road, Hockley Road, County Road 16, County Road 7, whichever one you want to call it. But yeah, no, that quadrant is where our new types of service will grow as our assets age, and the Island Lake, the Cardinal Woods, and the 5 Side Road area would be a good definition of the southwest quadrant of Mono.
Thank you. Ralph?
Thank you. I'd like to comment on number 3, which is the Bridge 5. That's the bridge on the here Ontario, just north of Hockley Road. This is a lovely area. It's a beautiful little drive down through there. We have talked about before whether or not we should replace this bridge or we should close it off. And I think that discussion, we want to keep that discussion open, as this is going to be an expensive thing if we decide to replace it. It'll probably cost similar to the other bridge that's just down the way, maybe $1.25 million or so. I do not have a position on this. I just want to bring it up as something that we should think about. We would be paying about 10% of our annual budget for a bridge that is very lightly used. I'm bringing it up also because there may be some of the neighbors, I know Singing Waters is just north of there, that use the bridge, and they might want to be apprised of the possibility that it was being discussed as whether we should maintain it or not.
Well, I think that's particularly important in view of the history there, because that bridge was substantially rebuilt back in the late 90s, and the road was closed for a significant period of time. And I don't recall a lot of opposition to the closure. So I think that's a debate that we need to have at some point, with some information about the volume of traffic and the feelings of the immediate neighbors.
So
it's just too bad that the rebuild in the 90s didn't last terribly long.
If I may continue, I think your point about getting some numbers is a good one, Mike. If we could get some idea what the volume of traffic is on that, that would help our thinking.
Off the top of my head, I could say it's less than 50 cars a day. It would have some spikes in the summertime on weekends, and the main access utilization of that north-south corridor would be for access to Singing Waters. So the traffic is low. The traffic is very low, and I think council would benefit hugely from a survey or an opinion poll from the residents. I don't know how far we want to go. This would be, in my recollection, the first contemplation of shutting down a road in Mono that's a three-season road. So I think council would benefit hugely from a residential impact point of view. I don't think I can guarantee you will not get numbers that support that this is a major throughfare. It's definitely a seasonal road. There would be, I found my numbers from the cost of removal. There would be $1 million savings here over, and that's 2022 prices, and we're not looking to do anything until 2024. So that would be probably an upwards, with the way prices seem to be rising, $1 million to $1.2 million savings, with still a $400,000 removal cost. We still need to remove this. We could turn it into a walking trail, and we may get more year, which leads us to the fact that we would have to rehab it a bit to leave it as a walking crossing. However, there will be, if you leave it open as a walking access, you subject yourself to four-wheelers and motorcycles and potential dirt bikes, with still the cost of rehab. So rehabbing it so it's acceptable for the walking public. So there still is a cost to removing and closing up and stopping up and closing dead ends. But I think if council's in agreement, I would like to sort of work with Andrew to come up with maybe some surveys for residents to give us some feedback, dedicated mail out. I don't know if somebody in Rosemont really has an opinion on this location. It's very, they may use it, but there's definitely alternative routes for that person. But I think the impact is to the people along here, Ontario, and council may benefit, and I could definitely work towards that. But having said that, I would still like to put some reserves in it. That could be modified depending on where we're still going to need the money, so I wouldn't want to modify it before we make a decision on closing it or not, but I think it's definitely something that council could think about.
So, Ralph?
I think Mike is looking for a support on a survey of local residents, and I'd support that.
Is everyone else in agreement on that? Okay, I think we need to proceed along those lines. Mike, I have two questions. One is, in my personal opinion, we should take advantage to the max of any available reserves or development charge monies for any of these projects. We shouldn't be shy or bashful about expending those monies. That's what they're there for. So I guess my first question is, have we availed ourselves of that opportunity, and is that reflected in the total cost that's being suggested today?
I generally put the cost of the capital investment into my budget, and there's no subtraction of the DC charges that would come, unless may be able to help me more here, but that I believe comes once you receive the overall budget. You get my cost to build, and then you'll get the treasurer's revenue generated from it'll be on a notes to page 13, I believe. Les would generally show something like that. I see his head. I say he's turned on his camera now. If you'd like to comment, that'd be great.
Yes, good morning. Pretty much what Mike has just said. This is just 100% expenditures, and then anything along the list that would qualify for development charges or any of our reserves, I would put in the revenue section. And on the page 13 notes, there'd be a little note word on the side that there's offsetting funding for that project. For example, there's 3 roads that Mike is suggesting to repave. So projects number 5, 6, and 7, they would qualify for gas tax because it's an asset renewal. So yes, there'll be offsetting revenues after this expenditure report.
My second question is, how does this compare with last year's capital budget? Bottom line to bottom line.
$53,000 less.
So, yes, correct. So it was 3.76 million that was submitted to council last year, and we're 3.71 this year. So roughly 50,000.
Okay. I asked some of these questions for the benefit of anyone who may be viewing the meeting. Any other questions before I read the motion? Fred?
It's not a question, but if we're closing this off, I'd just like to compliment Mike and Matt, I assume. This was an excellent report, and I appreciate your hard work on this, Mike. It's a good report.
So thank you very much, Deputy Mayor Nix. It definitely, I think the 3.7 is definitely something that council can continue to expect every year. It's generally keeps us in the 2% levy. I will say a couple things though. Our infrastructure is starting to age, and we'll work towards replacing it in timely fashions. And if council, I did have one statement at the end of my report that if there was any additional council projects that you thought might be entertained as some cost analysis stuff, I could definitely take care of that should council wish to put any of their potential thoughts into the capital improvements.
Yes, thank you, Mike. It is excellent work, and I'm glad to see that it's consistent with what we've been expending in the past. So I have a motion that council receive the 2022 Public Works Department capital budget. Do I have a mover? Councillor Mantalo moves, seconded by Councillor Davey. Any opposed to receipt of the budget? Motion is carried.
Thank you.
Thank you very much again, Mike. Item number 3 is the, item number 2 is the Shelburne District Fire Board 2022 operating budget, which we have in our package. Do we have a discussion to follow on that approved operating budget? Deputy Mayor?
Well, Sharon and I have gone through it. Our fire chief is very thorough. We went through every line item on it, and I don't know how he can't squeeze it down anymore. It only represents a 3.65% increase over last year. Of course, our share of that will be a bit different because we have a formula that splits that budget among 5 municipalities, and our share has been tending to decline. I would give council, though, the heads up that we still haven't set our capital budget. The preliminary numbers look a bit scary. Like the lowest they've got is about a 27% increase in our capital budget. I assume we will deal with that on the first week of December.
That's somewhat sobering. Ralph?
Fred or Sharon, can you tell me why we don't see the municipal revenue on this? We just have other revenues, and municipal's the major one. Is that not something you can propose at this time?
Fred?
Yeah, the municipal revenue, Ralph, is the very last line, total operating levy, $587,475, which Mono shares ballpark about 10%.
Sharon?
No, yeah, I was just going to say the same thing Fred said.
I'd like to see it
As far
detailed.
as the budget goes, doing the line by line thing, it's the cost of having it there.
I can tell you one other thing. When we get to the capital budget, to save money, our next fire truck is going to be red.
Yeah.
The Shelburne District Fire Board, we went to yellow fire trucks some years ago, and we're buying a truck from Brampton off the floor, and I forget how much it would cost to redo it in yellow. It's now red, so our next fire truck is going to be red.
What a relief. Just to the issue of the cost recovery, we're doing everything possible to recover costs and therefore offset operating expenses.
Are you asking that as a question?
Yes.
Yes, I think we are, and I mean, it's hard. Fire service is expensive. I believe the next truck we buy, we will consider it an addition to the fleet, which will mean that some of our share of the money can come out of DC reserves. Now, I'm not positive on that, but that's what we're thinking.
Well, arguably triggered by growth in Shelburne and elsewhere. Any other discussion of the operating budget? So I have a motion that the Council for the Town of Mono approves the Shelburne and District Fire Board 2022 operating budget in the amount of $587,475, which represents a 3.65% increase over 2021. Do I have a mover for that? Deputy Mayor?
And I'd like to speak to the motion, Your Worship.
Yes. And seconder, Councillor Martin. Fred, the floor is yours.
On a technical point, this motion is redundant. I know some other municipalities approve or disapprove of the Shelburne District Fire Board budget, but I've had long discussions with this, particularly when I sat on the board of the Nottawasaga Valley Conservation Authority. Technically, while we do represent the interests of the municipality that we come from, once we are appointed to a board, and Ralph, you've probably been through this, our interest at board level, we represent the board when we sit on the board, and we make decisions about the board. So I have already voted for this budget, notwithstanding the fact that I hadn't heard from Mono Council. The only thing council can do is appoint or unappoint a member of a board, but once they are sent to a board, they have full authority to make decisions for that body. So that's why I'm saying, Your Worship, this motion is a bit redundant. We can easily pass it, but it doesn't have any meaning in the sense that Sharon and I have already voted for the budget. It's been passed.
Any further comments? I'll resist because I have a contrarian approach to representation on external bodies, and also the fact that this is a budget matter that does ultimately concern this council and the ratepayers of the town. But that's as much as I'm going to say, and I think you've done a great job to pare it down to the absolute necessities. So, any opposed to the motion? Motion is carried. Next item is the Rosemont District Fire Department 2022 final approved budget. And Councillor Mankalo, do you have any comments on this budget?
Well, Just to note that the approved budget municipal levy for the operating budget is less this year than it was last year. It's $2,000 less. So I think that's related to changes in population within the three municipalities. I'm not too sure. So this is a complete budget in that it shows the operating and the capital budget, and it shows revenue, and it shows expenses. And that's what I was looking for from the Rosemont, or from the Shelburne. Shelburne doesn't include capital yet, and it doesn't include the division of between municipalities. So those are interesting numbers that I think we should have. So I have nothing to say about this budget. It was is approved. And just to comment on, Fred, I appreciate your instruction about the governance on the board position. I've taken a position that if, yes, I do vote to support or not support things, but that if it was an issue that had significant, and that's up to me, I guess, significance to Mona, that I would bring it before the Mona Council and discuss it, as I'm sure you would. So I think we shouldn't leave the impression that maybe we're autonomous there sitting on the board, but we're very much representative. That's all.
Yeah, I would agree, Your Worship, and I'm not a legal expert, but 10, 15 years ago, when I sat on the board of the NVCA, this issue came up, and it was rather thorny, and we got a long discussion paper, I think, from Credit Valley Conservation. I assume the lawyers had written it, and their point was, maybe I'm oversimplifying a bit, is that the council can appoint someone to a board or unappoint them, and that's it. Other than Ralph's point about bringing it back information for information purposes, once you are appointed to that board, and I know, John, you don't quite agree with this, I'm only giving you what this long CBC document said. We effectively make decisions for that board once we're appointed to it.
Yeah, I think the other impression that we shouldn't leave with people observing this interesting debate is that our representatives on external bodies are always very, very good at reporting back as to what is occurring. So it's not that they're autonomous, totally. It's they're still reporting back to council. They're still keeping us informed as to what's happening and what could occur in the future. So I think it's important that anyone viewing the discussion is aware of that as well. Any other comments or questions for Ralph? Linda, have you had a meeting yet? Have you attended a meeting yet?
I did, yes, I attended this one, and so I was all just learning. I was surprised about the increase, but, well, not surprised. Surprised, but not surprised, I guess.
Okay.
But yeah, I agree with Ralph. It was helpful to have, certainly for the first time, to see everything, the operating and the capital budget together, which I was confused about for the Shelburne one, but no, I don't have any additional comments really at this time.
Fred?
Can I just explain why you do not have the capital budget from Shelburne yet? It has to do with the problem we've had with one municipality in signing the new agreement that we worked on. We're still working under a 1991 agreement, which is archaic. It has the wrong legislation reference to it. 4 municipalities have agreed to the new agreement, and 1 municipality hasn't. And that's given some of us on the board cold feet about approving a capital budget. Last year, what we did is we froze it. We said, no, until such and such a municipality decides what it's going to do, we froze the capital budget. I don't know what we're going to do this year. But that's the reason, Melinda. We just haven't got around to the capital budget because, quite frankly, until we sort out what a certain municipality wants to do with the fire board, we're all kind of sitting there saying,
Understood. Okay, I have a motion. The council for the town of Mono approves the Rosemont and District Fire Board 2022 operating budget in the amount of $325,511 and the capital budget of $194,000 as presented. Do I have a mover for that? Councillor Mankelo, seconder. Councillor Martin. Any further discussion or questions? Seeing none, any opposed? And that motion is carried. Next item up is a letter from the Hockley Historic Community Hall and Church group requesting financial support. There is no motion on this as of yet, but I'll open the floor to questions and discussion. Sharon?
Just wondering, we did make a donation last year, and did we not make another donation later on? I'm not sure how it all went, if somebody else remembers. Just to, just to get a round figure that maybe we'll do it again.
Les, would you happen to have that information at hand?
Actually, it's in their letter. We gave them $3,000, $1,000 at first, and then $2,000 later, so $3,000 in total.
Thank you. And I think there was a contingent. It was contingent on a contribution by II.PROCLAMATIONS as well, if I'm not mistaken.
Yes.
Thank you. Fred?
yeah, I am concerned about this request. I understand their dilemma, and I understand from talking to John, who went to the meeting, that one of the big reasons is they are paying insurance on basically an empty building without any visitors. But putting that aside, last year, you correct me if I'm wrong, our total donations budget was $6,600. If we they're asking us for $8,200. I think technically what should happen with this request, if it should go into the request for donations budget of the 2022 budget that's coming up. I don't think we're in a position to grant it today, because I don't think there's anything left in our donations budget. But even if it went forward to 2022, I would still have some concerns, because it would be more than our total donations budget of last year. And the other thing that would concern me, we've had other requests from other groups, the Mono Nordic Ski Club. And what we've said to them, Ralph, you took the lead on this, was, okay, you want some money from us. What have you done in terms of your own fundraising? And I would ask the same thing of this group. Have they applied for grants? Have they done any fundraising? Or is the simplest thing for them just to turn to the town of Mono and say, here's our bill, pay us $8,200. I know that's a bit harsh, Your Worship, but I really do think I'd like to know the answers to some of these questions before I can agree to this.
Ralph?
No, thank you. Fred, those were good points, and I appreciate them. I think that given this is hopefully a once in my lifetime experience, this COVID catastrophe, that we won't be governed by strict limitations. We'll be more governed by bona fide needs. I did have some communication with Janice Mason, who was very active in this this community hall. This is an important community hall. It normally is self-supporting, primarily through their strawberry festival that they have in the spring. The request did go to Angela Toss, and I tried to contact the mayor last night, but I haven't had a response yet. It's a good question, Fred, whether they have done anything, and they have actually. They don't qualify for many grants. They did qualify for one grant, the Ontario Heritage Grant, and they obtained some money for that. I don't have the figure in my head, but I think it's $1,500. They've also done fundraising within the community, and that's an ongoing activity. They also have two online programs to get money. One is called FundScript, and the other is called FlipGive card campaign. And however, without the annual strawberry pancake breakfast, they're really not able to cover their expenses. This is a very interesting place. As you probably know, it's just around the corner from where I live, and so I'm aware of it, and I'm aware of some of the events that they do there. This is a significant asset to the cultural bankroll of the community without us costing us hardly anything. And if we were doing it ourselves in the town of Mono, I'm sure that we would not be able to carry it down the same way these volunteers have done it, to a very low expense. So I think that the direction you recommended, Fred, is the right one. That this be a part of our donation budget, and that we would look at providing approximately half of this as $4,100, and expect that AGTOS might come up with the same. And they may have some further fundraising success in the meantime. So in summary, I'm being a bit wordy. I think we should include them for our donation budget. We should include them to the extent of half of this amount. And I wouldn't be governed by the limitation of the fundraising budget that is historical, as the current needs are different. Thank you.
Any further comments? I'd just like to say that I did meet with the board along with Mayor Pinto, and we made the very interesting discovery that their largest single expenditure is insurance. And the insurer refused to give them any break whatsoever over the course of time that the buildings were shuttered. I contrast that with breaks that were given to us as drivers of automobiles. Because we were traveling fewer kilometers, we actually got rebates. But in this instance, they didn't seem to care that there was no one in the building. There was no liability per se, apart from the liability of a structure that's being, heated and obviously needs to be protected. But having said all of that, Mayor Pinto has applied for a grant to Enbridge Gas on their behalf. And we did undertake to explore whether or not they could be carried under our insurance plan. The answer, sadly, is no, because we don't actually own the building. I'm supportive of the request, and I don't know what the amount will ultimately be, because we spend a lot of money supporting both Menorah and Mono Center Community Hall. And of course, those in good times do generate revenues, but this is a corner of the municipality that I think we sometimes, I wouldn't say neglect, but we are not mindful of to the extent to which we really should be. So I'm supportive of the request going forward to the part of the budget that addresses the issue of grants. And again, I think that the letter should go forward, and then we'll have the debate about how much, if any. Mark?
Your Worship, just in addition and for Councillor Davies' information, the town also does write off the municipal taxes, so at least the town's portion of the municipal taxes for this building as well. So,
Mark, would you happen to know whether the county writes off its share?
I do not know, Your Worship. I don't believe they do.
Les
can answer that.
I could answer that. Actually, The timing of that question is good. I will be bringing to the next council meeting the municipal properties where council does write off taxes, and this building will be on that list. And when council writes off taxes for that property, it's for all 3 levels. So basically, Mono, county, and school board. And the rationale we use is normally they would be under Mono ownership because it's similar to a Mono service. So there'd be no taxes in theory would be levied. And of course, the whole amount is written off. So that amount be coming to the next meeting, and it's just over $2,000 in total.
Sharon, did you have a comment?
No, that's good now. Yeah.
The other thing I neglected to say is that they are a venue for such things as concerts over and above what they do with the Strawberry Social. And they're a significant, as Ralphie said, a significant heritage of heritage value to that part of the town. So I think the best approach is to have it go forward to the part of our budget where we talk about donations and take it from there if everyone is agreeable to that. Sharon?
Perhaps another conversation to have is in special times, do we up our donations bucket?
Well, I think we probably all have views on that. But between now and when we address this again, I think we need to have a chat with the adjacent community to see whether or not they're going to be budgeting for it as well. Kim?
I just wanted to say that over the years, I've worked hand in hand with the coordinators of the church, and it's been a reciprocal relationship in that groups that we cannot accommodate as far as rentals, like maybe not-for-profit groups that even can't afford our rental fees, I'll send over to the church, and they're very, appreciative of receiving those groups coming over, and they're very accommodating for them as well. They, in return, have sent many customers to us as far as our rental facilities for Mono Center and Menorah. So it's been a wonderful reciprocal relationship with this group, and I just wanted to let council know that we do certainly enjoy some marketing from them and just a great experience with them. So.
That's certainly what Mayor Pinto and I heard in our meeting with the volunteer board. It is a 100% volunteer board.
Yeah.
There was a suggestion that it become a part of our respective recreation programs or have counselors on the board, and we all laughed that off, and we thought that, if you've got a good volunteer board that is working, why spoil it? Fred.
Yeah, since I was the one who came out rather negatively on this item, I will admit, after listening to the wise counsel from my fellow councillors and Kim, that I'm prepared to soften my position.
Okay. Now, the final point I'd make, and I think it's something that we need to determine, is whether there is any particular urgency to this request, or whether it can await our final determination, I guess, in January. We'll endeavor to find out if there's any, if there are any timelines that may be involved here. Ralph?
I noticed that Janice Mason has joined us, so maybe she could answer your question right now.
Janice, are you there?
Would you like to respond to John's question about the urgency of payment?
It's, because she's down in part of the town that has some of the worst internet, I think we may be losing her on and off. We'll follow up and find out if there's anything that we need to know for the next meeting.
Hello, can you hear me?
Yes?
I'm Susan. John, you have met me. I know that Janice is on the call, but I can report that her microphone on her computer is not working. So I just wanted to report that we're on this and listening to you.
Okay, thank you.
Okay.
Can you answer the question as to whether there is urgency to this request or whether it can await a decision in January?
January, we are almost December. I think January could work. This is urgent because we are without the funds. We have not had them. We have not been able to generate. But we do have a good board. We are fiscally very prudent. So I don't have a straightforward answer to that question.
Okay. Well, if somebody can follow up with me on that, that would be helpful.
Well, we will get. I know that Janice is hearing all of this. She just cannot communicate back and forth with you.
Okay.
I'm sorry to the other council members. I'm also a board member.
Thank you, Susan.
You're welcome.
Okay. So under bylaws, correspondence, new business additions to the agenda, the first item is an updated emergency management program. And I have a motion that I'll look for a mover and a seconder to allow us discussion that we introduce and give the necessary readings to a bylaw to adopt an emergency management program and emergency response plan for the town of Mono, that it be signed by the mayor and clerk for the town of Mono, sealed and engrossed in the bylaw book. Do I have a mover for that motion? Councillor Martin moves, seconded by Councillor Magdalo. Discussion, questions? Fred?
Yeah, using the page numbers on our agenda package on page 50, it says the appendices to this agreement, or the annexes, are confidential. And I was curious as to why that is. Why are they confidential?
They're confidential because many of them contain information that we don't necessarily want to release. So, for example, there's an annex that has everyone's mobile phone and home phone number. There might be other ones that detail certain specific criteria for our essential infrastructure and plans to ensure that the resiliency and maintenance of those. These are things that might not necessarily want to be released to the public. That's why the annexes are always, and that's not new. That's the case in our current and existing emergency response plan, that the annexes are not considered public.
Fred?
And on page 53, again, using the page numbers from our agenda package, what I would ask you, Mr. Simpson, is what if there's a severe storm in April? You probably wonder why I'm asking you that question. On page 53, it defines situations where we may have emergency management. It says if there's a severe winter storm, we can do it. And if there's a severe summer storm. So my question to you is, what happens if we had a severe storm in April?
Okay. I think by summer and winter, they're referring to the meteorological respect of the storm, not the time that it happens. So within weather and meteorology, they define storms as summer or winter. I don't think it, like I say, it ties to the calendar of the year.
Thank you, Mr. Simpson.
Mark, did you have any elaboration on this?
No, I think just to point out that the last time, the last few times this has been adopted, it's been ground up to the county. So we would have adopted first and then the county last. In this case, the county has adopted first and bringing it to the lower tiers or local tiers. It's probably Just so council is aware, we got pretty much 90% through this just before the pandemic. And we ended up with some municipalities that were under an old plan and some that were under a new plan, and there were some nuances. So it'll be nice to get this approved by all levels within Dufferin County so that we're all on the same page.
Any further questions? I just have one, and that is the differentiation between what we are seeing here as an emergency management program committee versus the municipal emergency control group. Can somebody assist in terms of again, mainly for the benefit of those watching, what these two different committees do?
Yeah, I can field that, Your Worship. So the Municipal Emergency Control Group is the team that actually manages an emergency. So that is convened either before or once a state of emergency is declared by the town. And again, it's the management group that oversees the conduct and the response to an emergency. The Emergency Management Committee oversees the administration of the emergency response plan. So it reviews the plan annually and recommends changes and files an annual report with the province.
Okay. Anything further on this? So there's a motion on the floor. Is there any opposition to the motion to give the necessary readings to the bylaw to adopt? Seeing none, motion is carried. Next item up is the 2021-2022 inspection report for Cardinal Woods drinking water system. And I have a motion that we receive the MECP Cardinal Woods drinking water system 2021-2022 inspection report. Do I have a mover for that? Councillor Martin, seconded by Councillor Manctolo. Discussion? Deputy Mayor?
Yes, Your Worship. I read that report carefully, and I'm not happy. We've obviously had some issues. We weren't able to maintain pressure properly, and we weren't able to tell if we were monitoring it properly. We didn't disinfect all parts of the system properly, particularly within one of our reservoir cells. And I think some monthly testing reports were unavailable at one of our wells. We weren't monitoring the individual UV lights properly, and we did not meet the requirements for lead sampling. Now, having said all that, I will point out the water is perfectly safe to drink. That's not the issue, but there are some things that we're not doing correctly. My perspective is look, we are the owners of this water system, and we contract the operations out. And right now we contract it to the town of Orangeville. And this report is not good. And we've had a series of reports that suggest we're having problems. So as the owner of the system, I think it's time for us to sit back and review our options. What are our options? Maybe today isn't the day to do that. And before we review our options, I would ask Mr. Dunmore a question. That in this inspection report, we've been ordered to have some things done within a couple of months to satisfy the inspector. I think the deadline was, January 2022. So I know the town of Orangeville has a new manager of infrastructure services. And I apologize if I can't quite pronounce his name correctly. I think it's Mr. Kochalak. And now I know he's only been on the job for about 2 weeks, but we have some things that have to be done in a month or two. And I'd like to know from Mr. Dunmore, has he contacted him to find out, is he aware of these things that we have to get done, and is he working on them?
Thank you, Deputy Mayor Nix. So I was able to touch base with Gary yesterday, Him and I talked in detail about the contents of this report. We talked about a whole slew of items that he may or may not have been aware of in the past couple of years. So we went through that. He has identified to me that he agrees that the filling of the positions that are vacant at the town of Orangeville is a top priority. The public works manager has been filled, but there are some other environmental areas that need to be filled. And he also identified and agreed with some of the internal and external audits that have identified a water technician support for some administrative areas in the town. So with respect to that part, I have talked to Gary. He is working very diligently on filling the staff that are required to hopefully eliminate these types of issues in the future. With respect to, sorry, I've drawn a blank. Was there a second question there?
No, that was really the only question. My comment was, I think we as a council are going to have to review our options. I'm not quite sure when we can do it, that, Your Worship, but that wasn't a question to you just yet, Mike.
So with respect to the MECP deadlines, they're required to meet those, and those deadlines have been worked out with Orangeville staff on setting up the timelines for the meeting of the deadlines. So they've been a part in setting the dates, so they should be able to meet them.
And I would hope maybe exceed the expectation time-wise.
Always.
Ralph?
Thank you, Your Honor. I'd like to register that I'm very upset about the report. There are at least 4 things there. There was a drop in pressure, which was probably due to a mechanical thing, which is nobody had control over. There was a problem with the inadequate disinfection when they were working on cells 1 and 2. I think the transducers were in trouble, and there was also a problem with lack of monitoring and lack of keeping records for a number of months. And finally, there was some testing that should have been done. It's actually a formality that they do the pH testing because there's no lead in our system. But it still is a part of the protocol that we're supposed to be following. So I'm concerned that the protocol has not been followed well, and this is not just something in the last report. We've heard about it before. So it's notable and critically important that none of the lapses affected the water supply's sterility. There was a problem with low water pressure earlier this year, and as I said, that was a mechanical thing related to a breaker that didn't function properly. So I don't think that that's an issue of management. The other things are an issue of management, and my feeling is that we have a problem here, and we should deal with it. And Fred has asked for us to look at options, and I think that you and I've had discussions with you, and I think you are looking at options. So it's important that everybody understand that the council's taking this issue very seriously, and it's not going to be something that we just go on to carry on as usual.
Any further comments? I wholeheartedly agree that we need to be looking at options. We have a fiduciary responsibility for our water systems, and I would note that every member of council recently toured the Cardinal Woods drinking water system facilities and other parts of our water system as well. So we are very mindful of our responsibilities, and I believe that we are taking appropriate steps to rectify the deficiencies that have been brought to our attention. Mark?
Your Worship, we're at SFL, we're certainly very aware of Council's concerns with the reports that have been provided to you over the last 3 to 6 months, and we will be having a report on an upcoming meeting regarding this matter.
Thank you. So is there anyone opposed to receipt of the report, the motions on the floor? And that motion is carried. Last item on the agenda, but before we talk about matters being brought forward, we have a recommended appointment to the Recreation Advisory Committee. And I have a motion that council appoint Sally Cohen to the Recreational Advisory Committee. Do I have a mover for that motion? Deputy Mayor, seconded by Councillor Davey. Any discussion of appointing Sally Cohen to the Recreation Advisory Committee? Yes, Fred.
She would be an excellent choice.
Absolutely. Kim, any thoughts?
No, excuse me, I totally agree with Deputy Mayor Nix. I'm very, very pleased that Sally contacted me and put her name forward.
Yes, terrific. Okay, any opposed? And that motion is carried. And going to the bring forward matters from.
Your Worship, Melinda has her hand up.
Hi, I'm sorry.
Yes, Melinda, sorry.
Sorry, I was going to ask for clarification. Just, it's terrific that we've got Sally joining, but we do have spaces available on the Recreation Committee. Is that true, Kim? I was going to ask. Did she go away? No, there she is.
No, right here. Yes, we can have, according to our bylaw, up to 7 members, plus a council rep, plus myself. And at this point now, with Sally, we're at 5 members. So we do have room for 2 additional members on our committee.
Great, thank you. I just thought that it would be an opportunity, for the public who's listening, you may not know, and that we're going to gear up and have more events. And so more people would be terrific if anybody else wants to add their name like Sally did.
Indeed. And Fred Simpson, correct me if I'm wrong, but there is an online mechanism for people to apply for some of these vacancies?
There is. I haven't currently turned that on for this committee, pending council's position and the director of recreation, whether we're going to open it up. But I will ensure that that's on and available for people to apply.
Terrific. Okay, congratulations to Sally on her appointment. We had 2 items identified from Schedule A to bring forward and address. Item number 6, and I think that was Fred, you asked for that to be discussed.
I just wanted to make a comment, Your Worship, that I found that to be a very interesting, informative letter from Mr. Sinclair. I have no idea how we would do what he suggests we do to Island Lake. I suspect it would be very expensive, but it was a very informative letter, and I appreciated reading it.
Any further comments on item 6? Ralph? You're muted.
As somebody who's been rowing on this lake for over a decade, since from the ice going out to coming in, it's a very important lake to me as a recreational lake. It's interesting that in the management plan, and I confess I know this secondhand, I haven't read the management plan, the draft, but that they do now mention recreation as being one of the important reasons for the lake. And that's so obvious to anybody who uses it recreationally, that it's a tremendous resource for people in this area. I too found it interesting. We did a study. We actually did testing of the depth of the lake at the time when there was a proposal from CBM to go below the water line with the adjacent quarry, and they had all the wrong numbers with respect to the depth. They thought it was twice as deep as it was. So I see that Mr. Sinclair recognizes that it's a shallow lake, and in fact, it's shallower than that at the end of the fall. I also enjoyed his history because I didn't know everything that was there. You're right, Fred. It'd be pretty expensive to dredge that out, but it's probably going to be an ongoing problem. You know, this year was one of the probably the lowest that I'm aware of water levels for the lake, and this started through the summer, and it just got worse and worse. And there's not much margin for error here. I should say, not error. There's not much margin for it to go lower, or it becomes something that's going to be labeled Island Lake mud flats.
I was intrigued by the reference to the pike as being an invasive species. I wasn't aware of that because there was obviously a conscious effort at some point to put pike into that watershed. I would have thought they'd stock it with trout. There was an attempt a number of years ago to not so much dredge Island Lake, but to remove some of the weeds, and they put some kind of contraption out there that promptly capsized. So it didn't really work out terribly well. Ralph?
Well, we've looked at this as the rowing club as something that we can do. There are various contraptions you can attach to the back of a motorboat, and we've never decided to go with it. It's possible that you could. The weeds are terrible, so that you catch your oar in the weed and you go flip over. The weeds are too deep to swim, but fortunately it's shallow enough you could stand up. Cutting the weeds, there are a number of issues there. What do you do with them after you cut them?
Yeah.
Anyway.
Yeah, exactly. Exactly. So item number 8 was also identified for discussion. Brad?
I would like to point out, and I don't quite understand this, if you go to page 174 of our agenda package, this is the letter from John McKenzie of TRCA. And this is with respect to the new regulations that have come out under the Conservation Authorities Act. And as you know from the last meeting we've held and several other meetings, I'm quite concerned about this and having to negotiate agreements with our 3 conservation authorities. But I draw your attention to about the 4th line down on page 174, where he says that the TRCA does not anticipate any changes to its self-sustaining programs and services that benefit our watershed. And I don't quite know what he means by that. Does he mean the programs TRCA runs that have fees associated with them, that they are self-sustaining and therefore the new regulations won't affect those services? If that's what he means, I understand that, but I'm not sure why you'd have to tell us that. That would seem to be obvious. The other possible interpretation of that sentence, self-sustaining programs, I can't believe he means that there won't be any changes to any of. I'm not sure what self-sustaining programs means. My expectations had been the conservation authorities would have to negotiate with us, and our what are considered non-mandatory services or other services, categories 2 and 3, we municipalities would decide whether we wanted them and how much we would pay for them, and we negotiate. So clearly, there's a possibility that these new regulations would affect those programs. What I don't quite understand is whether this sentence is referring to them or not. So I'm a bit confused. Maybe somebody else can educate me.
Any takers?
Mark has his camera on.
Yeah. Mark?
I have my camera on because I've lost pictures of all of you. I was just trying to see if it was working. I haven't had any further discussions with Mr. McKenzie or his staff since I originally met with them in the early winter, or I guess late spring, sorry, with these general managers of both CVC and NVCA. So I know they're very well along with their discussions on MOUs with the regional governments that they serve down there. I think we're kind of the small fish in the big pond at this point in time. They have very little land management and other services within Dufferin and Angela. So I think all I can say is they may be confident with where they've seen discussions go with the regional governments. Other than that, I can certainly begin discussions with Mr. McKenzie in that regard.
Fred?
No, I don't know that that's necessary. What I'm a little worried about is that, you know, they've extended the deadline to 2024. And my understanding is all the conservation authorities have to give to us by the end of, is it February 1, Ralph? Their list of programs and services with costing. And it's at that point, we then start to sit here as a municipality and say, yes, we want that program. No, we don't want this program. Yes, we're prepared to pay this much. No, we're not prepared to pay this much. TRCA is sort of saying, I've read this in other documents, they intend to have these MOUs in place by the first or second quarter of 2022. Whereas my understanding was we would have a whole year and a half to consider these lists of services and decide which ones we want, which ones we like. Let me give you an example, Ralph. And maybe TRCA is being a bit too glib with this because they mainly deal with the big municipalities to the south of us. They have an education program, right? We pay a levy right now every year, which partly funds that, but very minute amount. But does the town of Molo want to continue paying TRCA for an outdoor education program? None of our students go to it. And we have two other conservation authorities that run similar programs. Now that in fairness, that's a very, very, very minute question. And it's probably inconsequential as to whether we could, but I'm giving you that as an example of the type of thing I think the town of Molo has to look at when we get this list of programs and services. And I'm just worried that TRCA thinks, oh, this is a slam dunk, and they're just going to rush it through and say, here's the agreement, Molo, sign it. These worries may be unwarranted, but I'm putting them out there now as something that concerns me.
Ralph?
Right, I think your deadlines are correct, Fred. Actually, that webinar, it was interesting trying to follow the dates. There were about 6 different dates were given for various things. I think that we have to have something in place according and it's submitted to the Ontario government by 2024. I think it's January. But the individual conservation authorities, my sense is that they can set their own timetables to try and work with the municipalities, and obviously TRCA is ahead of the game on this. So they may be asking us early next year these questions, and I think we can probably answer them, particularly with respect to them, because they really involve a very small part of our municipality.
Well, I have to admit, I was a bit surprised to see the wording, the notion that TRCA wasn't going to take a hit from this provincially driven process to get back to what they believe to be the core functions, because that was what started this whole debate. And simply because they feel that these things are self-sustaining, I'm assuming wouldn't save them from the provincial thrust of core business versus everything else, whether it's sustaining or not. Have I missed something there?
Not sure.
Fred, have I missed something there?
No, I think you're sort of puzzling over the same question I am.
Yep.
You know, and I don't have an answer, John. Yeah.
Well, let's sit back and see what comes our way, and you know, and maybe probe the edges to find out whether their belief that if it's self-sustaining, whatever that is, that somehow it's immune from this provincially mandated paring back of the role and responsibilities of the conservation authorities.
By the way, Your Worship, I would point out that I know TRCA staff do monitor our council meetings and listen to them very carefully. So they will
Okay.
have heard all of this conversation.
Excellent. I'm glad we have viewers and fans. Okay, I have a motion that we accept Schedule A to this agenda. Do I have a mover to that, Councillor Mangtalo? Seconded by, oh, sorry.
I'm sorry, I'd like to add item number 7 for discussion.
Sure, absolutely.
Can we go ahead with that now?
Yes, please.
So I must confess, it took me a little while to understand the map, which was turned sideways. I'm not used to north being off to my left and east being straight up above it. But anyway, I finally figured out that this is the Nottawasaga River, which Fred Nix lives beside, and that it was telling us if the North Dam breaks and Island Lake is lost to the Nottawasaga River, I guess through a Baker Creek, how much the rise in water will likely be at various places. So my one question is, do we know if this table that has each of the that has been prepared for the residents, if this is being sent to people along the Nottawasaga River? That's my first question. And the other one is actually not a question, it's a comment. It's interesting because I tried to look up yourself, Fred, which is, I think, about E, somewhere between the third and fourth line, I believe. And you actually sit about 90, a little more than 90 meters. That's hard to believe, but higher than or lower than the dam. Now, I may have misinterpreted this, but it also suggests that you'll get a rise in water level of about 3/4 of a meter, and it'll come about at peak about 2 hours after the dam breaks. So this is very interesting to see. You know, we've had a dam break out in BC and flooded a lot of dairy lands and other agricultural lands. And the prospect of a dam breaking is something that I guess is something we have to consider these days. But actually having a model which suggests what would happen downstream, I think that's quite fascinating. I would hope that it could be turned on its proper, put the north at the top of the next time.
Mark?
Your Worship, sorry, I've turned my camera on. I'm having connection issues here. This was provided to council because it is being provided to your residents. I guess that's the answer to question 1 from Councillor Mangtalo. And just for council's information, this particular scenario actually was an interject of one of our emergency management exercises last year. So we're certainly aware of it as an issue, and we have actually gone through a one exercise where it's been an interject. So just for your information.
Fred?
Yeah, I really appreciated getting this, and I am going to fill in my name and my address and my cell phone number, but I have to tell you, Ralph, I know you row Island Lake quite often. I bike and hike across the North Dam, and I'm not terribly worried about it failing. In fact, although I'm not a dam engineer, I will say that that dam isn't going to break until hell freezes over.
Looks pretty solid to me.
You're absolutely right. And the water pressure is not high. It's a very shallow lake.
And there is presumably relief at the south end to send more water down the Credit River.
Exactly.
Because there's a spillover there.
Correct.
And they can control the outflow. They do control the outflow. It's an active process.
Yes. Melinda?
Well, that was also hence the fish situation brought up by Mr. Sinclair, right?
He doesn't want any of those pike getting into the Credit.
Or the Nottawasaga.
Right. Any further discussion of this item? Any other items that anyone wants to bring forward? So I have a motion that we accept Schedule A to this agenda. Do I have a member? Councillor Martin moves, seconded by Councillor Davey. Any opposed? And the motion is carried. Reports of members of council. Who would like to go first?
What about staff,
Right.
Your Worship?
Hmm?
Okay, but I don't we put staff on first?
Oh, sure. Either way. It says members of council / staff. I thought I'd go with council first.
Okay, the only report I have, it's the same as Ralph. We attended a webinar put on jointly by AMO and Conservation Ontario last week. I sent a very quick report of that webinar to Mark. It's essentially most of this you've already heard, but it was about the new regulations under the Conservation Authorities Act, okay, and the deadlines. And I think you've all heard the deadlines, and Ralph and I listened very attentively, and we are trying to keep abreast of these developments. That's the only thing I have to report.
Thank you. Any other members of council have anything to report? Councillor Manklow?
Nothing that's happened, but in the future, beginning tonight, I'm taking part in a 4-evening webinar that's being put out by the Jesuit Ignatius College, I guess it is, in Guelph. And it's actually being sponsored by Pollination Guelph. And it's a rather holistic look at our humans' interaction with nature. So I'm interested to see what this is all about. And I've sent this invitation to every member of the pollinator volunteer group, which is over 50, to see if anybody else wants to take part in it. That's all, Your Honor.
Terrific. Any other reports of members of council? Seeing none, if we can go to staff. Mark?
Your Worship, not a lot since last meeting, last week. We did have a meeting yesterday, Dave and Mike and I, and I think you'll be hearing more on this particular issue coming forward, but was with a member of the development community, and they're looking to push for redesignation or at least reclassification of our employment lands, our commercial industrial lands to residential. We do have 2 ongoing properties, and these would both be located within our existing settlement areas. So just want to kind of give council a heads up on that, but it seems to be par for the course across the county. I think as county councilors, you've probably already heard from various developers in Shelburne and East Garfraxa and Amaranth regarding the same issue. So it looks like it will be rearing its head here in Mono as well. So just a quick update there.
Fred?
Can you tell me then, Mark, I'm aware of this. If we changed the amount of land we have zoned for either commercial or industrial to residential, we cut down on the number of employment lands we have, or the amount of employment we could entertain in Mono. Do we need provincial permission to do that? I ask it in this sense. When I saw the latest report at the county level from the consultants, I forget the numbers, Dave, but they're anticipating in the next 30 or so years, Mono is going to take on another couple thousand people. Well, to do that, we've got to have some land zoned residential somewhere, I think. So by changing the land now from commercial to residential, that would solve that problem. I guess what it does then is it takes away employment land. So again, my question is that something the province controls, or can we make that decision on our own?
That would be, I was sorry, I didn't mean to interrupt.
Morris.
If you wanted to finish.
Okay, let me just jump in for a couple of seconds. No, it's not something we directly control. The upper tier Dufferin County plan has policy provisions in it for Dufferin County to have authority to approve amendments. My princes there. It's a good song though. Official plan amendments at a lower tier that have enough complexity or significance to them that the upper tier becomes the authority for approval. So one of them is an employment land conversion. or say another would be a settlement boundary expansion. And by extension, yes, also the province will be involved in that because they use the upper tier, the region or the county often, not always, but often as their go forward approval authority. But certainly in a case something like this, Dufferin County would be conferring with the province as well under the policy of the growth plan. And no, we don't have to pre-zone. I mean, you and I think some others whom I copied through, what do the numbers mean coming out of Dufferin County? It's to plan for the growth and to particularly urban areas, right? Particularly settlements on full services. So I think it's fair to say that the bar is a little lower for rural municipalities with predominantly or entirely private services. We have some growth allocation to be sure, but the province knows well that it's going to be modest for us, and we will have to at least try and plan for that forecasted amount out to 2031, 41, 50.
Fred?
As a follow-up, Your Worship, if we change the zoning from either light commercial or industrial to residential, and particularly for one of the properties that I know this is being talked about, don't we also have to take into account that that one property is in a place where our current water system is under a water quantity threat? I mean, does it make sense to turn land that's in an area where we have a water quantity threat into residential? Well, we've already been told by the experts that we have a long-term water quantity threat there. Why would we put more houses? Is that factor taken into account?
Well, Mark's going to say something, but my little bit on that is, again, a designation change is not the end and the beginning and end of it all. There's other factors that come into play, including servicing. So a desire to simply pursue a change in designation or zoning, it doesn't start there and end there. The whole design of a development, if I can use that word loosely, includes such things as you just alluded to, as well as others, but certainly servicing being one of them. I'll stop there.
Mark?
I was just going to say for Council or Deputy Mayor Nix, we're in the very early days on this. There's a lot of discussions and a lot of matters that need to be considered, including the servicing. While the water threat certainly exists on the west side of the town in our suburban community, we probably have a more critical issue on the east side of town, and that's the arsenic levels. So there's a lot of issues that need to be balanced out. And when we're looking at growth moving down the road, we've always reacted to the commercial light industrial uses that we've had in our official plan, whether it be the plaza to the north. They have an extensive area of undeveloped commercial industrial land, and same as the Aragon development in the corner there. That was always premised through the developer side. And there will need to be reports that look at the growth matter and how it ties into the growth plan, as well as the servicing and as well as the loss of employment lands. So I guess my caution would be, don't get ahead of yourself until we see where we end up with all of those matters in totality.
Well, the other thing to be mindful of is municipalities that get out of kilter in terms of the ratio of residential versus commercial industrial end up having very, very high taxes for the residential component. So I think you need, in order to maintain some degree of health, you have to have a correct ratio of residential to, commercial industrial to residential. And we don't have to go very far to find examples where conversion to residential has resulted in maybe a one-time big payouts and development charges, but long-term stability. I don't think so. That's just my recollection of a first-year course I took on municipal governance many, many moons ago. Anything else? Okay. So further reports of members of staff. Mike, I see you're live now.
Yes, Your Worship. So just a couple quick things. Rumor of a tractor trailer off the road on 30 Side Road last night is true. Not quite sure why he was there at midnight, but he was jackknifed, and we had crews dispensed to take care of that. Receiving a few, and I say a few, budget requests from residents. So Council may, I've been working through some of the answers to them, and Council may hear from a couple residents that requesting, and I told them to pay attention to our upcoming agendas for the public presentation of the budget to discuss those with Council. And the electric vehicle charging station at the town lot has been energized, and it is available on the World Wide Web now as a location under Flow. But I know that Your Worship, I think you're working or waiting to hear from the county on a presentation with respect to the actual. I think what the county's doing is trying to wait till all the lower and the upper tiers are installed before they launch the media outlet. But anyway, it does show up on, if you do have the app, Fred, and I know you'll be allowing me to help you download the app so you can locate it in our parking lot, but and teach you how to pay. But I'm sure that'll all be launched by the county.
Mike,
did
is there
see it was
something
energized.
put up on our website to announce the presence of the charging station and the fact that it's been given power?
Yeah, I don't know how you turn something on and then you wait a couple weeks before you do the media launch. So it is available. I think you do have a really good point, and I'll work with Fred Simpson to see how that looks like from a public-facing point of view, and Andrew can maybe work with us to do something on that.
Fred, you had your hand up?
Well, I was just going to tell Mike that I did try to get the handle off that thing, and I don't know how to work it. You'll have to teach me. I tried to pull it out. Well, on that particular day, I was driving a gasoline-powered car because I'd loaned my electric car to a Syrian family who needed a car that day. But I still would love to learn how to work it.
Ralph, you had your hand up? You're mute?
Well, I'll pass, thank you.
Okay. Mike, back to you.
That's it. Thank you, Your Worship.
Okay. Any other member of staff with a report? Kim?
Yeah, just, excuse me, something I wanted to bring to council's attention regarding access to the trails over at Island Lake Conservation Area. And a couple of things. One is I have been contacted by a number of residents now wanting to affirm with me that they will still have access to the trails into the conservation area once our parkland renovations are complete. So I've assured them that they will still have access. I'm not sure what form it's going to be in, but I've also mentioned to them that the actual trail that council that was the original part of the development for the park, for Island Lake Family Park, will now be stopping at the tennis courts as opposed to going right into the conservation area. So I just wanted to let council know that I have heard from the public and that our residents are eager to continue to be able to access the park. I've also heard from speaking with my rink coordinator at a Purple Hill Park that, and I never even thought about this, is that road parking at Purple Hill Park has increased since we closed the access to the conservation area from Island Lake Family Park because of the renovations. And this was something I'm not sure if any of us really thought about, but there is also an access to the trail system from the Purple Hill Park area. So just wanting to make council aware of that as we go into upcoming discussions regarding access to the conservation area from different points within Mono.
Any questions for Kim? Ralph?
Not a question for Kim, but I do have a comment. It's about Mike's comment about us wanting to let people know that the plugs are there for the charging. You know, people, everybody has an app. I just looked up mine. It's called PlugShare, and right there on it it has Mono Town Office and two J1772s, which I think are the 240 volt, 30 amp. It also tells you that the first 2 hours are free, Fred, and so after that you pay. Mike, this is something that I think everybody who has an electric car gets used to using. Is just open this up and they see all these little things on the map there, and they zoom in on them, and it tells you what type of a charging system there's there.
Thank you for that, Ralph, and I hope we can incorporate that information onto our website. Any further questions of Kim? Any other members of staff? Dave.
Just quickly, Mayor Kerman, I did read this last council meeting as well, but again, we do have a committee of adjustment meeting on the 25th of November at 7 o'clock standard time and date, third weekend of the month. So just letting people know that. Thanks.
Thank you. Les, do you have anything for us?
Actually, I have nothing new to update council. We are working on the budget. Kim's capital is coming to council next council meeting, and then start pulling everything together for the budget meeting in January. Otherwise, everything's good in Treasury.
Thank you.
Thank you.
And Fred Simpson, anything?
No, I have nothing to report, Your Worship.
Okay, I think that's everyone who's online. Next item is notices of motion, and I have a notice of motion with regard to the property known as 308399 Hockley Road, also known as Schitt's Creek Motel. I think the motion is fairly explanatory, and I think necessary given the approach of the Niagara Escarpment Commission that seems to want to put the owner through what I believe is a totally unnecessary and gratuitous hoop prior to their actually presenting a normal development permit application for what they want to do on site. Any thoughts or discussion? Yes, Melinda.
I read through, and I remember when you mentioned this to us, and this is a concerning thing for a new property owner and so on. I am not clear on why we have to have such strong language. It seems that we are accusing them of being vexatious is very strong, and so that's my question.
Well, if I may, the owner has had discussions with the NEC staff who are making this request, which is highly unusual. In fact, our Dufferin County representative on the NEC has only once ever encountered a similar request of staff, and it was in circumstances far different than this. And one has to be mindful of the fact that they want to get going. They have a vision for the property. It's I think going to be interesting from the standpoint of tourism and redevelopment of that site in a responsible fashion. And this request, which again, no one has ever heard of before, and I think I've talked to Dave about this, no one has ever heard of the NEC doing this before in quite this fashion, is going to add months and months and months of delay. So I chose the word vexatious because I believe it is, and I think the commission needs to be sent a very strong message that when they put these kind of barriers up, it invites, frankly, contempt. Who's going to go through an NEC development permit process again when they're going through the hoops that are thrown up in their way like this with no legislative authority that I can see or that anyone else can see? So, Melinda, I was quite impassioned on this. I remain impassioned on this because I know people who've gone through the development permit process and they've been put through the hoops, and they tell their friends and neighbors. And quite frankly, I think a lot of stuff goes on without regard to whether they should or should not get a permit. And I think that's troubling. I think the process should be inviting. It should be expedited, and people should be encouraged to make proper planning applications and be expect that they be dealt with in a fair and fast fashion. Ralph?
I agree with everything you say, Your Honor, but I think that Melinda has a good point, and it would be a good idea to change that word, which is a little bit emotional, to something a little softer, such as distressing, rather than vexatious. Just my thoughts.
I'm happy with that as a friendly amendment, but I still think it's vexatious. But let's change the wording. Let's change the wording. I'm happy with that. What was your alternative word?
Distressing.
I think it's perfect.
Yeah,
It is distressing. Go ahead.
I mean, certainly my experience with the permit with the NEC was difficult, prolonged, and surprising.
And vexatious.
But I don't think it was deliberate. I think it was more a competency level or a manpower level, or things that you couldn't really hold one person accountable as that it was on purpose, which is vexatious. Yeah. So it's just I like Ralph's word.
So Fred Simpson, can we make that amendment to my motion, the wording of my motion?
I'll make that amendment and then have it on the next agenda, Your Worship.
No, I'd like to pass this motion today.
Okay, with the agreement of all of council, then it can be moved from a notice to an actual motion.
Oh, so
this was a notice of motion that you requested, Your Worship, so it's on as a notice, but with concurrence of council with a simple majority, as a verbal vote, it can be moved from notice to address during the same meeting.
Fred, I submitted this a number of days ago with the expectation that it would be dealt with today. So it was a notice of motion that I think under our procedural bylaw turns into a motion that can be debated at the meeting today.
Okay, like I say, my mistake then. I went on the terminology that you wanted it as a notice, but again, without a doubt, this can be addressed today.
You're right. I called it a notice of motion, and I'd like to ask for the indulgence of council to pass the motion today as amended. Okay, thank you, everyone. I won't label it. Mark.
I'm not going on the process question you just went through. My question is, how do you see this being implemented? Is this staff writing a letter? Is this yourself writing a letter? I think there needs to be a review of the file, that there was nothing through the 90s and early 2000s regarding change of use here. I know there was a push for residential at one time. So we probably should have that in our hand before we go over to the NEC. And I haven't seen anything to this landowner. I wonder if we start with a request from them regarding what are they actually requesting this landowner to do, if it's just to prove a nonconformity or if it's to prove that there's never been a change of use if it was applied for in the past.
Where this hangs up is the NEC staff is insisting that they prove that there hasn't been an interruption in use. The owner has hired Mr. Diamond, who's a well-known planner, who has furnished them with a letter that shows a timeline that, in my estimation, demonstrates conclusively that there has not been a substantial interruption in use as a place where people have lived, and for the most part in a motel or rental setting. It was used briefly for a family transition place. There was a period of time that there was some renovation that went on. It's not clear whether or not it was closed during that renovation. But my hope was that we would pass the motion and forward it to the NEC. There is a time issue here in as much as they have put this on their January agenda. And what is distressing about this is that if they come to the conclusion that the sky is actually blue and this is an uninterrupted use, the owner is then going to have to present a development permit application based on the actual physical changes that they want to make to the building. Correct. So my hope was that we accept the evidence of Mr. Diamond and the property owner that this is an unnecessary step. And I agree with Councillor Davey that sometimes they are buried in work, and the delay is often attributable to their lack of resources. But in this instance, they're actually introducing another layer of activity for their own staff, which I just don't understand. I don't comprehend it. Mark?
Yeah, thank you for the direction. That's fine. And just to let you know, I'm very aware of Mr. Diamond, and he is a former planner at the Niagara Escarpment Commission. He was our local area planner prior to Gary Murphy. So that goes back to the late 80s. So
yeah, and he's done work in Mulmer Township and is well respected in his profession. His letter is very compelling, and this would be of an assist to his submissions to the Commission for their consideration on the 20th of January, or hopefully they have a change of heart prior to putting it on the agenda in January. Councillor Davey?
Just as a matter of process. So you have, when Fred Simpson was talking about how you brought the notice of motions, so we were going to then agree to find out more about this. Like, there's obviously documentation and so on that you have seen that should the council not see too?
Well, I submitted, I think I sent Dave Trotman a copy of Diamond's letter to the NEC. If I didn't, I intended to. And again, we're not being asked here to comment on a development permit application. We're being asked by the property owner, or I've been asked by the property owner or approached by the property owner to comment on process only. So this is without prejudice to anything that they may want to do on that site. It's simply saying, why do you have this extra layer that is a burden to the property owner before they can even go ahead, hire an architect, hire others to develop materials necessary for a substantive NEC permit development. Dave?
Thank you, Mayor Kerman. There was a short report. I've been going through it, and I want to, I'm trying to get some information as to how the matter transpired, and more importantly, with respect to Mr. Diamond's report, what evidence or what transpired with respect to any kind of cessation of use. He's alluded to it in his report, but there's nothing definitive at this point in time. So that kind of remains outstanding to this point. If whether or not cessation of use was ever declared, I do not know. He's alluded into his report the fact that there's no reference to it in the Act, the Niagara Government Development Planning Act. So those are a few questions I'm still trying to get some answers to as well.
Well, if it's the wish of council to delay this, I do not know what more we'll find out that offsets the convincing arguments that in fact the motel use predates the NEC plan approval by the province. That should stop the discussion right there. It's a pre-existing use. And again, in the experience of people who've worked with the commission for years, this is an incredibly unusual request made of the property owner. Virtually unheard of. Fred?
I'm prepared to go ahead with it today. In fact, I'll move the motion that we approve.
Is there a seconder? Councillor Martin? Now that motion, Mark?
Your Worship, we ran into this, I think, with one of your first notices of motion, but shouldn't the move, I guess you can't be, sorry, I apologize for that. You would have been the mover. So I'll back off my comments entirely. And I have no problem with forwarding this on to the NEC.
So this motion is to simply deal with this issue today, and then we'll vote on the motion itself. Is that your intent, Fred?
Yes.
Okay. Is there any objection to addressing this motion today? I know we could spend a lot of time trying to verify various things. But again, this is not a commentary on what the property owner wants to do. It is a commentary on the bureaucratic hoop that they're being asked to jump through. Is there any further discussion of the motion to proceed with the motion? Okay. Any opposed? So that's carried. Moving along to the actual motion, I'll move the motion. Is there a seconder? Councillor Manctolo, any further discussion of the motion as amended with the change of the word vexatious to, did we say troubling? Or what was the word we changed it to? Sorry.
Distressing.
Distressing.
I have a question. I'm a bit confused. I'm really confused as to what is the important fact here in allowing them to continue with this as a motel. Is it that this was approved as a motel before the NEC, whatever, or is it the fact that it has not been used continuously as a motel? Could somebody elaborate on that, maybe Mark?
David just flipped me Mr. Diamond's report. I haven't reviewed it. I have run into similar situations with this where you do have non-conforming uses. So if the issue is that it's a non-conforming use from the NEC, then they do have policies regarding continuation of uses. Now, the effective date of the NEC plan is 1985, June 12th, I believe. So they do have policies for continuation of those uses. I'm not sure whether that's what the issue is as to whether they would then need a plan amendment. Tai Chi went through this process, or whether they're saying that, no, you're not entitled to that non-conforming use because you've had other uses established since that time, and you've lost the right to be a commercial or motel use. So I'm going to have to review Mr. Diamond's report and the background further before I could answer that to you, Councillor Mankelow, but there could be two different reasons that they're pursuing the avenue they are.
John, should we sort this issue out before we consider it? Maybe we have to defer it for another meeting.
Well,
sorry, Your Worship, I was just going to say, I don't know if there is. I think you're at least going to make the NEC come to the town with their particular issue. I think at this point in time, what we're seeing is information coming back through us, through the mayor, through his discussions with the landowner, and not anything in particular coming from the Niagara Escarpment Commission. So it would certainly start that line of communications.
well, and that's why I'd be in favor of it going ahead today, is it would flush out the NEC's position, and they would have to justify why they are adding this extra layer of bureaucracy to what would otherwise be a simple, straightforward Niagara Escarpment development permit. And again, I have had discussions with our representative on the NEC, and she is totally mystified by why this is being imposed.
Okay.
Any other discussions? I feel like I'm being a bit of a bulldozer here, but I feel strongly that when we have an interesting opportunity, that barriers are being thrown up that may be totally unnecessary. Melinda?
Just also I understand you're very concerned about this, and so I don't want to be the one who says, but I mean, the guy only got for possession, right? The owner is it's only been 60 days that he's had the property, right? Like is that true?
It's a new owner.
September 2021, and it's only November. Yeah, so it's not like things have been totally delayed for him at this point, and for us to, if we were to get more information. But I guess that's what Mark is saying, that this will then start more information flowing, and so that would be helpful. But it doesn't seem to me like it's been I mean, to have a property, I mean, he's pretty good if he's got a development plan and everything for property that he didn't even own within just 60 days. Yeah, that was my comment.
I think they're in a hurry, and I think they anticipated that they wouldn't have anything. They're fully aware they're going to have to satisfy the NVCA in certain regards. They're completely prepared for any normal permit process. What they're objecting to is the unusual element that has been injected here. And I think, to be frank, it's a fairly impressive team of people that the owner has assembled, including Mr. Diamond. And they just want to get on with it. Anything else? Okay. Any opposed to? Fred Simpson?
So, Your Worship, if I just can confirm that Councillor Mankelow, then you still second this motion, because you did express a concern about whether it should go forward. So I just want to confirm.
Oh, absolutely. I may second a motion that I'm going to disagree with, just because I want to keep it on the table. So that doesn't determine whether I'm going to vote for it or not.
All right. I just wanted to thank you.
Thank you.
Okay. So if I may, if I can call the question, any opposed? Going once, going twice. Thank you very much. Thank you for your indulgence on that. Any other notices of motion? Councillor Magdalene?
Yes, Your Honor. I'm sorry. I can't talk now, I'm sorry. Yes, Your Honor, thank you. I have a notice of motion, and Fred Simpson, the wording is not yet finalized, but the essence of the motion is it's a social justice motion, and it is dealing with the issues of diversity, inclusion, and equity. And I'm proposing that these are issues that the town should look at and possibly take some action on. And there are 3 areas of possible action. The first, which I'm quite strongly supportive of, is that we should have a committee which is charged with the developing of a Mono diversity and inclusion strategy. And the second and third, the second I think is actually in progress, but I'm not sure right now. That's that we have diversity training for the town staff and council. And I think that Mark can maybe fill me in on this, but I know this has been discussed before, and it may be in the works. And the third is the consideration that we might use or have at the next town hall meeting a discussion on diversity and inclusion. So the exact wording will be, I'll have the exact wording for you next time, but it will deal with this proposal that particularly that we develop a maiden mono diversion and inclusion strategy. And I'd have to say that I have had very little discussion with the county, and I will do that. I'll talk to some of the people that are on the county committee and see where they're at. I know that there's some thought that maybe Mono doesn't need to do this, we could leave it to the county, and maybe that's correct, but I sense that we really should be involved here as well. Thank you.
Any, Fred?
So just procedurally, make sure I understand this, Ralph. You're putting this motion on the table today as a notice of motion, which means it will be on the next agenda.
Exactly.
The only other comment I would make, because I sit on, well, at least a committee that has a subcommittee dealing with this at the county level, and I'm not up the learning curve on it yet. But if we are to do something here in Mono, the one suggestion I would make is that we piggyback on some of the things the county is doing. For example, I believe, but I'm not up the learning curve yet, they will be doing some staff training. I don't know who's going to do it. I don't know what it involves. But if that's the case, it would seem to make sense to piggyback onto that effort.
Yeah. Yes, I think when we've talked about this before, and certainly in my discussions with Mark Hurley, the hope was that we could join up with other municipalities in so far as any training initiatives are concerned. Melinda.
Right. Yes. Thank you, Your Worship. Yes, we did discuss this since I've been around, or maybe it was the one I observed. But the idea that Dufferin as our superior tier is doing something, and so rather than duplicating, not that it isn't, just to duplicate doesn't mean it doesn't, or not to want to duplicate doesn't mean it's not an important topic. It obviously is, but that I guess we're at this point now, Councillor Mangelo, because things have taken longer than, like when you said you haven't been able to get information from Dufferin as to what's going to trickle down to us that we don't need to duplicate?
Let me clarify. If I said that I haven't had the difficulty getting information from them, that's incorrect. I have not explored what they're doing yet. So that's a contact that I need to make and have some more information.
Fred?
And just on that point, Ralph, the subcommittee or whatever it's called that is looking into this at the county level, and Laura used to sit on it. I did read all of their minutes up to their most recent meeting. I haven't seen the minutes from their most recent meeting, but the one thing they did at their most, I have read the agenda for that meeting. They had a presentation from some people from Toronto, and this was with respect to having municipalities in Dufferin commemorate or comment on the residential school issue. I don't know what the recommendation coming out of that meeting was. It was on their agenda and they had a presentation, very good presentation. So, I mean, that's something I think the town of Mono, well, let's wait until we hear what their recommendation was, but that's where that subcommittee was at last time I checked.
Thank you. I'd just add that I think that inclusion of this as a topic for our next town hall meeting date to be determined is a good idea, because it will give our local residents an opportunity to address us on the subject. So for certainty, this will come back on the agenda of our next meeting under bylaws, correspondence, new business, and additions to the agenda. Any other notices of motion? I do not believe that we have any in-camera items. So I have a motion that we introduce and give the necessary readings to a bylaw to confirm the proceedings of Council of the Town of Mono in session 25, 2021, held on the 23rd of November, 2021, that it be signed by the mayor and clerk, sealed and engrossed in the bylaw book. Do I have a mover for that motion? Melinda, seconded by Fred. Any opposed? Seeing none, do I have one last call for anything else before I call for a motion to adjourn? Do I have a mover to adjourn? Councillor Martin moves, seconded by Councillor Nix, or by Councillor Mantelo. Any opposed to adjournment? Motion is adjourned. Thank you very much, everyone.
Thank you.